Good afternoon, everyone. So glad to see so many smiley faces here for, I think this is about our fourth or fifth community resources update for seniors. So glad to have everybody here. We have two guest speakers this afternoon. We have Bill Leisman with Team Leisman Cares and Kathy Mendham with Proactive Seniors. We're going to do a similar format. I call it Fireside Chat. So rather than formal presentations and slides, we're going to have a conversation back and forth. You can put up your hand if you want to ask a question, or I'll unmute you. Or you could also put something into the chat box, and then we'll go through the questions at the end. Right? So I don't know if you've heard of the name Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. He's one of these guys that has done a lot of TED Talks. And his advice to people is that they don't really care what you do until they know why you do it. So if you think of people coming in and saying, oh, you know, I wash cars or I sell cars, they don't really care about that. They want to know, okay, like, who are you as a person and why did you get into it? So that's how we're going to do it today. So Bill, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
So my question to you would be, why do you focus on seniors in your real estate practice?
That's a good question, and Kathy's going to hear this again because she's heard it many times. I think it starts out with an experience I had with my mom. We had been in the industry for a few years, and my mom called me up and told me that she needed to or wanted to sell her property that she'd been living on for over 35 years. My dad had passed away years before, and she felt it was time to change her home. Being a realtor, I thought, okay, this is an easy thing to do, and it's my mom, and we go forward. As I went through the whole process with her, I realized that as a realtor, strictly on the basis of real estate, we were not equipped with the tools as realtors to help service that particular market. And I realized that there was a lot more involved with all the stuff that she had, the finances that she was dealing with, where she wanted to go, all of that. So it wasn't as easy as just buying and selling a property. It was dealing with all of the stuff. And I realized that if I hadn't been her son, I would have not done as good a job as she deserved. And I felt that that particular segment of the market was underserviced, because there's so many nuances. It's not as simple, transactional kind of thing. And a lot of times people don't need to particularly buy and sell. They need other services. And so that was the reason why we started focusing in that area.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. Kathy, how about you? Why do you work with Proactive Seniors?
Why do I work with Proactive Seniors? It's a very similar story. So I have 20 years of experience in healthcare. And when my father was unwell and had to enter the healthcare system as a patient, we found it so difficult to make sure that that we had the information that we needed to make the kinds of decisions that needed to be made in the time frame in which they needed to be made. And even though, I've worked in healthcare and I've worked with Alberta Health Services for many, many years, I realized how difficult it is for families to make those proactive decisions because the information is so hard to find. We don't know what resources are out there. We don't know what services and supports we need to be able to look for the resources. And it just came to me that it's an unreasonable expectation for families and seniors to be able to find out all the information that they need to make those kind of decisions proactively so that they get the best care or treatment, so that they can stay out of the hospital, avoid the fall, avoid the medication mix-up. And so I took it upon myself to start an advisory company. And we're now nine team members in Calgary, and one in Kelowna and one in Edmonton, all with various healthcare backgrounds, nurses, OTs, physios. And we're all passionate about making sure that seniors and their families have the information early so that they can make decisions, so that you don't end up running into trouble and having a poor outcome, or having more medical care than you might have been able to avoid. So it came from that same perspective of having to go through it with a family member and realizing this isn't something that individuals have the time or necessarily the capacity to figure out. And it makes sense for someone to be available to help guide them through those decisions and help people get the resources, the support, the benefits. There's so much out there that people don't access, and it's not fair. And they need to have more support than what's provided. So that's what we do. Yeah.
Well, I think proactive pretty much says it all. And how many times are families being reactive? It's after the crisis has hit that all of a sudden now it's a big panic and having to find a place for families to live or that sort of thing, or the fall, and now, okay, the house has to be sold now.
Mhm.
And there's 47 years worth of family things in there. Okay.
Yeah.
So Bill, I guess the next question is sort of, how is it that you work with seniors in your practice as a realtor?
Well, from our perspective, the first step is to ensure that everybody's comfortable, that they know that we're working on their behalf. Our agreements explicit in the fact that we are working with their interests as the primary interests. How do we do that? Well, it's a consultative situation, and the reality is that we want to bring in as many people into the decision-making process and through the consultation as possible. Family members, whether that's kids or spouses or advisors, into those conferences or meetings to go through a whole consultation of what the needs are. What we often find is that their first step that someone thinks about is, well, I have to sell my property to get a smaller property. And it's not always the case. Sometimes they don't need to sell at all. Sometimes they need to bring in a different service that helps them deal with what they're dealing with. So it's really a consultation with the seniors and their families and their advisors to make sure that all of their needs are being met.
Do you find sometimes that one of those parties is more keen on the selling and moving than the other?
Almost every time, if it's a spousal situation, it's often one person is driving the train and wants to make a move more than the others. But and again, it's making sure that all the needs are met. But yes, almost all the time, one person wants to move and someone doesn't. And then it's diving into why that person wants to move and why the other person doesn't want to move. And maybe there's some kind of compromise that can happen.
And how about the children? Do you find sometimes that the children are pressuring family one way or the other?
We've had both good and bad experiences. So most of the people that we've dealt with, the kids are on board, the children are on board to do what is best for their parents. Okay. We have run into a few that have gone sideways, but it's rare that we find that. It's mostly the children, when they come in and we've gone through that exploration, they are on board with whatever the parents' best needs are.
Well, that's good to hear. So Kathy, tell us a little bit, like, how is it that you work with seniors or their families, or is it usually the seniors or usually the families?
Yeah, so we have sort of the three main areas that we work in. I think today I was to talk mostly about the housing, but we come about it very similar to the way Bill does with his real estate practice. It starts with identifying what the goals and wishes are. And, we always want to make sure that we're working towards the seniors' goals and wishes, and that we actually have everybody on the same page with regards to the goals or wishes. So if we're helping someone for planning to staying in the home and aging in place, then we're working towards that goal. But we're also often helping people who are choosing to move or need to move to a residence or long-term care setting or some kind of seniors housing. And we're again working towards what their goals and wishes are and trying to make sure that we're going with that. That is our direction. And then our next approach is to do an assessment. And our assessments are looking at in relation to housing, what are the healthcare requirements? Because if you're going to be moving into some sort of retirement residence or facility, you want to make sure that the healthcare requirements meet what your needs are now, but also what your needs are likely to be in the future. And so we use our professional experience to try and anticipate what's the likely course of aging, what are likely the requirements for care down the road, so that you're not moving multiple times, because that's a lot of work and a lot of effort. We want to make sure if someone's moving into a retirement residence or a care facility that we get it right the first time. So we start with that assessment, looking at healthcare requirements. We look at what their personality and personal preferences are. There's so many options in seniors housing. There's 250 different options for seniors in Calgary alone. And it's really important to get a good fit. You know, not everybody wants the super fancy place with the pool and all of the different amenities. Some people do. Some people want something that's quiet and casual and cozy. Some people need to be in the subsidized market. Some people need to be in the public system through Alberta Health Services, and some prefer the private market. So we're combining all of that information from our assessment, the healthcare requirements, the personal preferences, and the financial perspective. And then we use that information to compare it against all of the sites. We've toured every single one of them. We know what's good and not good about them all, and then we can make recommendations as to which places are the best fit. And then the senior and their family can then take that information and make a really informed decision. You know, there's never any pressure to move with our seniors housing support. We're very happy to help people age in place at home. But if moving is what they're intending to do, then we want to be sure that they get into the best possible location for them. That's how we go about it.
Sorry, just a second here. You'll have to unmute yourself then. There.
Can you hear
Yes,
me?
Peter.
To that topic, my concern is how do you vet the different facilities? My wife and I looked at the other day Marketplace's investigation on long-term care facilities in Ontario. And you want to go upstairs and slash your wrist because it's so bad. Is Alberta better? Do we have a better vetting system to make some of these long-term care facilities qualify for what you're supposed to be doing? David Common, the commentator at CBC Marketplace, was saying that these things in Ontario had gone for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and the breaches are never fixed, and there's no, the ombudsman can't do anything for them either. There's no teeth in the laws. So are we different from Ontario?
I don't think that the system is any different. Long-term care in particular is still overseen by the same, the same oversight exists. What happens in Alberta that does provide some information is that the facilities go through some fairly rigorous evaluation procedures on a fairly regular basis. I think it's every 2 to 5 years. And you can find that information on the Alberta Health Services website as to how a public facility has rated on a number of criteria. And they'll look at resident happiness, family happiness, cleanliness, infection rate, is the physical site of the building meeting the criteria. So you can go through and see all those measures. But, I wouldn't hang my hat on that being all of the information you want to have. What we encourage people to do is to look at those measures, but also find out about what's the consistency of staffing in a facility? How often is the turnover? How do they deal with incidents or issues that arise? And so what we like to provide people who are looking in the public system is a list of questions that they go prepared with to ask when they're touring, so that they're asking very specific questions about the quality of care, the management structure, how a care plan is arranged, you know, how family might be communicated with in emergency, you really have to be an advocate for yourselves and ask the questions that are going to give you a sense of whether they are a well-run, well-managed facility or not. In terms to how COVID, for example, has managed in Alberta, we certainly didn't have the extreme situations where we had military coming in to take over care of places, but we had some pretty terrible experiences with a few locations where the infection rate just got out of control. And it really highlighted a lot of the challenges and risks that have been in the system in public healthcare for a long time. And I really hope that there's enough media attention now that they're going to make changes, because changes need to be made. Changes in staffing, changes in how they budget and pay for care versus profit. So I think is it Peter or Paul? Peter? Peter, you have some very legitimate concerns. And I think what families need to do is they need to be diligent and ask the right questions and look at a number of options so that you feel very comfortable that you've made the best choice you can if your loved one does need to go into that level of care and that kind of a setting. Does that answer your question? I mean, there's challenges there for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate your answers. My second question would have been, is that once you establish the questionnaire, by the way, is it possible to share that link?
Yes, I can share it.
With the group?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the call, Peter, I will mail, I do sort of like a thank you, and I will email out the contact information for Bill and for Kathy, and also the link to that Alberta website. So if somebody wants a copy of the questionnaire, they can contact Kathy for her questionnaire or guidance.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
One thing I'd like to just to point out, when we talk about long-term care, that is really what we used to call nursing homes. It is the end of the road, the absolute last resort when people need a phenomenal amount of care. Typically, they need what's called a two-person transfer, and that two people need to get you up to move from your wheelchair to your bed. So these are people that are very, very, very debilitated. Peter, you and your wife are not going into long-term care. That's the end of the road. You are going into independent retirement living or assisted living if it's private, or supportive living if it's government. So
hopefully that remains, but you never know what fate.
Yeah, by the time you,
brings you.
if or when you need long-term care, you will not be making the decision. You will be likely not have your faculties around you. And I think that long-term, like true long-term care, I'm going to be really apolitical or politically incorrect right now. The people that died of COVID, if they were truly long-term care, my God, that was probably a good out. Because as my dad says, pneumonia is the friend of seniors. Because his view is people that have, that have had strokes and are so debilitated that are at the point where they are just plain existing. It's a really sad place to be. And I think that long-term care is still just warehousing people, because it's the true long-term care that's provided by the government. I mean, it's long-term, but I think care is a bit of an oxymoron.
Well,
oh, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, one last comment is when it's all said and done and you made the right choice, what is the breakdown on the type of facilities that you might be looking at?
That's a great question, Peter. So I try and simplify it because it's kind of complicated. As Jill just said, the terminology is different between private and public sector, but there's essentially 3 levels of care and 3 payers, and they kind of overlap. So if you start at the lowest level of care and payment, there's subsidized housing. And so subsidized seniors housing is for independent seniors. So they don't need a lot of medical support. You can have home care support, but it's not different than the home care you would get at home. And that is paid for on a sliding scale based on your income. The next level up from there is independent living in a retirement residence, which would be private pay out of pocket. So the government doesn't fund independent living unless you're a low income senior. The second level of care is assisted living or supportive living. So in the private market, that's called assisted living. Public market, it's called supportive living. And that essentially means that there is healthcare staff in the building on site 24 hours, and they're there to provide support, but they would anticipate that it would be on a relatively scheduled basis. So you would know that someone's coming in to help with bathing and dressing in the morning, maybe some activities at lunchtime, and then helping to tuck someone in or get them ready for bed at night. So assisted living and supportive living is the middle level of care, and it can be paid for either publicly, partially paid for through the healthcare system, or privately. And then the third level of care is long-term care. And that's, what most people would consider nursing home care. There are private pay options in nursing home or long-term care, but mostly it's publicly funded. And that's a care level where you need nursing care on an unscheduled basis. So nurses might need to go in and check on someone on a regular basis. They would need help going to the bathroom, transferring, as Jill said, usually complex dementia or complex medical conditions like stroke or heart attack would be where people would end up in that third level of care. So there's really three levels, and then there's three payers. The payers are subsidized, public, or private. Does that help?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, so the first one was sort of why Bill and Kathy got into what they're doing and how they're working with seniors. I guess the last piece is so like the real nitty gritty. So we probably cover a little bit of that. So what exactly do you do with the seniors that you work with, Bill?
Well, again, it starts with a consultation with all the people that would be involved in the decision making, and we go through a stage of consultations to decide what is the next step look like, and that's where we actually partner with people like Kathy, who we brought in before to make those decisions. But we're going to go through a series of questionnaires to determine what are the needs, why are people making the moves that or why are they contemplating the moves that they're going to make. If it does come down to a situation where they are going to be selling and relocating, then it comes down to what do we do with the stuff? What do we do? Do they have all their wills and estates and that documentation in place? What do we do with the stuff? How do we move the items that they have that they're going to keep? What do we do with the stuff that is not going to be kept by the individual? And we bring in people that can help the seller with that. It's making sure that we have a discussion over financing, because that is often something that is a critical component of moving to the next stage. And then it's just going through that process. So once we get through that decision-making tree, we bring in a stylist. People have called her a stager, but we call her a stylist. She helps with determining how to best prepare the property. Then we bring in photographers and measures to prepare the listing, and then we go forward with the listing. That is the technical component of it. But really it's a matter of determining what is the next step for that individual and bringing in the specialists. At one time, and a lot of realtors have this same idea that they can do it all. We don't. We bring in stylists, we bring in Kathy, we bring in the legal people, the financial people to help make those decisions in a holistic component. To make that whatever transition that individual is going to make it as smooth as possible.
Kathy, did you want to, are there some more sort of black and white specifics you want to share with us?
Well, I did explain already. I kind of jumped your list. I explained already how we go about what we do with seniors housing. So, if we're very happy to work with seniors that want to stay in the home. And when we work with those seniors, we're making sure that we know exactly what their risks are and all of the services and programs and benefits that can come to bear to help them with that goal of staying home safely. And then when seniors do need to move, essentially, we're just making sure that they have all the information they need to make a really informed decision to make their best choice. So it's quite, a simple dynamic. It's one or the other. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes people are going to be staying in their home for a while and they want to know where they might move to or what their options are. So similar to what Peter was asking is, what do I need to think about if at some point I need that level of care? And we're very happy to help people who are trying to make those decisions. It's a good alignment when people are doing financial planning to talk to us about what the costs might be, what their options might be for retirement planning in terms of housing or care in the house. So I guess, just if you ever have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out and we can talk about how we might be able to support you. But I feel like the more information you have, the earlier you're talking to your loved ones and starting to think about what your options are, the better choices you're going to make and the more options you're going to have. So that would be the only thing I'd like to add is start talking early, start understanding what your options are early so that you have choice and you're not kind of railroaded into something that you don't want. You want people to be able to direct their future and be able to know that they're comfortable with the decisions that they're making. Yeah, does that help?
I had mentioned to you that I'm from Winnipeg originally. I moved to Calgary about 9 years ago. My mom and dad live in their own condo. It's a bungalow style condo. They're 88 and 89. And so we've been talking about, okay, now what happens? If they want to stay there as long as they can. I have suggested a home modification and they said, oh, well, we don't need that. We can still, they've got one of those designs where it's one step down into the family room and then one step up into the sunroom. So we could very easily just raise that floor and they could just roll all the way through the condo from the laundry room to the kitchen, to the dining room, the bedrooms, etc. Oh, but we're not going to do that. We don't need that yet. Well, why don't we do it now before you need it? Oh, so anyway, I'm, uphill battle. But what we did talk about is, okay, now, if one of you goes first, what's the plan? Because they've been married now 66 years. They will be, when they lose each other, even if they scrap sometimes, they will be devastated. And each one will be so phenomenally bereft and lonely. So talking to them, well, my mom's a princess. So she's not going anywhere unless she can get service like she does on the cruise ship. So she's definitely into the red seal chef, the white linens, the nice flatware. So the spot she likes in Winnipeg, if they had a 2-bedroom one, would be 12 grand. Yeah, a month. Now, if she scaled back and only had a 1-bedroom, then I think she might be able to get it down to about 8 grand. My dad, on the other hand, he wants to go to this other one because he wants to have a balcony. He loves sitting outside. He spends a lot of time outside. So he's going to go to this one because it's only, sorry. Oh, this is one of the ladies who wanted to log in. Just give me a sec. Hi, Heather. You know what? We're just about done. We're about halfway through here. Yes, you did. No, it started at 1. So we're about halfway through. I don't know if I can bring you in right now, but I'll debrief you afterwards. Okay. Well, I'll give you a call tomorrow. Okay. Okay. Okay, sounds good. Alrighty. Bye-bye. Sorry, folks. So Dad wants to go to the one that has the little balcony, and it offers 2 meals a day. He doesn't want to have to get up and go down there for 3 meals a day. He's quite happy to just have 2 meals, and he can eat as much as he wants. So his place is probably maybe about 4 grand a month. So big difference here as to who's going to go where. And so I said to him, well, okay, if you want to go to that one that's $6,000 a month, I hope you don't plan on living longer than a year, because do you realize how much money that is? So we'll see. They have very different views. I love what Kathy does. I'm one of these people. If I go into Home Depot and I look at that down that aisle and there's 400 knobs to put on drawers, I just about have a panic attack. So I would feel the same way when Kathy tells you that there's over 250 living options in Calgary, and I go, my eyes glaze over. I want someone to cut it down. Like, this is what I'm looking for. Just tell me the top 5, maybe the top 10. I think it's a phenomenal use of time. I love what Bill's doing with the seniors, because he's recognizing that it isn't just the senior whose house you're selling. There are all these other people involved. And Bill better not go in and list Dad's house and then experience the wrath of daughter Ruth, who says, my dad's never moving because he built this house from scratch and we're going to keep it as a mausoleum. So I think you're both doing terrific jobs in what you're doing.
Well, can I just interject on that? With my mom, that was a real issue. My sister was very upset that she was selling the home that she had so many memories of, and there was all this stuff that Mom didn't want anymore, that my sister didn't want, but she didn't want to get rid of it either. Mm-hmm. And so that's dialogue that we have to have with all the parties involved. It's really quite emotional.
And the outcome from that would be some storage locker company would benefit, because Mom doesn't want the stuff. Daughter says you have to keep it. So now it's going into the storage locker for $200 or $300 a month. And the value of that stuff is, probably not.
Yeah. It's probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Kathy, can you share with us an interesting family situation that you've run into?
You're putting me on the spot. God, there's so many interesting family situations. Well, one thing that's just on the top of my head from what Bill was just saying, so I'll start with that, is, when people reach out to us and think, we need to know what our options are for assisted living, for example, sometimes that's not where we end up with them. Sometimes we end up realizing that they could use some modifications in their existing home, and then we can make those recommendations as to what can be done so they can stay there longer. So you don't always have to move if you think you do, but sometimes it means moving into a townhouse or a condo or a villa. And that might be the better price point. So I just think, Jill, when you talk about the prices of some of these private pay retirement residences, it is always a shock to people, the cost of this kind of living. Even if people have buckets of money, they're surprised at the cost. And so there's other options that we sometimes will help people explore if maybe they don't need a high level of care at the moment. Maybe there's a transition spot where they can go into a condo or a villa or something like that. So it's really good to start those conversations so that you're considering all of those options. One of the things in terms of the pricing that we often advise people to think about and talk about is what we call the tipping point. So if you want to stay home or you're planning to stay home, there is a cost to that too. You might need to bring in extra home care, because public home care, it honestly doesn't provide very much. And at some point you might need more. So if you're bringing in private home care and you're bringing in somebody to deliver your meals and you have a driver who's taking you places, you might get to the point, depending on how expensive of a place you like, where your costs at home start to exceed the costs of a facility. And so we like to help people understand that too, so that they know, where is that tipping point? At what point does it make more sense for me to be in a retirement residence versus being at home? Because it often comes down to the cost, and the cost is a really important consideration to start talking about early. So in terms of an example, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, Jill. There's all sorts of stories, but ultimately we love helping people find the right solution, and it's just so wonderful to be able to provide that support. We've got just such great experiences working with families. And as Bill said, you know, it's almost always a good experience once we get everybody on the same page and they're all kind of thinking the same goal. Then it just is such a more supportive outcome for seniors. So that's our hope, is to get everybody feeling like they were heard, they were understood, their concerns were addressed, and they're happy with the outcome.
This sounds a little bit like mediation or conflict resolution.
It always is a little bit of that, yeah. But you know, it's nice sometimes to have someone who's not part of the family come and have those discussions, because you know, family dynamics can be complicated, and you know, children might feel very awkward having those kind of conversations with their parents. And sometimes parents feel like, you know, I don't need to listen to my kid, I'm the parent, right? And so when you bring in someone from outside the family that doesn't have you know, a vested interest, we're a neutral party, and our goal is to make sure everyone has the information they need to make a good decision, it can diffuse a lot of those relationship and dynamics. It can really make it hard to move forward with a decision. Sometimes you just need someone from the outside to come in and help shepherd that decision making along.
Yeah.
Well, and to add to that, one of the things that happens that we experience a lot is that a lot of the times people have got it in their, they've got a decision that they've almost made. We've got to sell our home and we've got to get into assisted living, or we've got to move into a condominium, or we've got to do whatever it is. And a lot of times husband and wife will be talking about that. Sometimes they bring the kids in, but often they're not. And what ends up happening is they have a predisposition to a decision. When we come in, we start offering them options that they might not have thought about, and maybe moving isn't the option. Maybe it is bringing in someone to take care of the outside yard. Maybe it's someone to take care of, help them with the cleaning, or as Kathy said, home care. I mean, those are options that people may not have thought about prior. They just have a predisposition. We need to get into a condo, so that's what we're going to do. And it's not always the right option for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or maybe just not the right time. You know, maybe it's a great option, but it's not the right time. So yeah, we just, you know, want people to feel like they're working with all of the possible options available to them. Yeah.
With that, oh yeah, Peter, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
I have one last question. Going back to Kathy, would you review the two-tier home care scenario?
Sure.
You know, if we were, say, we like where we are because it's geographically just perfect, we like the neighborhood and all that, how much would it be to have someone come in? And that's subject to an assessment, is it not? So would you like to review it?
Sure, I would be happy to. That's such a great question. So in Alberta, or in Calgary, we have public home care, which is great because we've all been paying for it for all of our working careers. And so it's free. Public home care is free. And they come in and they do an assessment, and they determine, they get to decide what they think you need for support. And there's certain things that public home care will do. They'll do personal care, so bathing, dressing, putting on compression stockings, helping people with taking their medications at the right time. And the nurse that comes in to do the assessment will determine what they feel is required, and what their, if that's within their scope of service, they'll allow you to have that much home care. And it used to be that you could get about 4 hours. The most that people could get was about 4 hours a day, 5, maybe 7 days a week. That was kind of the max that public home care would provide. So if you needed more care than that, or if you needed services that were outside of what they do, so if you wanted housekeeping beyond like just cleaning up the dishes, or if you wanted help with laundry, or help with making food, or doing errands and doing groceries, those kind of things, then you have to go to a private home care service, because there's only certain things that public home care will provide. If you go to a private home care service, then you're paying, on average, I would say $30 to $35 an hour for that caregiver. And they'll do anything that you ask them to do, any of those services, driving them, taking them to appointments, cleaning your house, making food. They're quite open to do whatever is requested of them. So often what people will do is they'll start with public home care. And when they get to the point that they're needing more than what's available, they'll add on private home care. So they'll stack the two of them. And that's a good option because you're getting the best of the free stuff and then you're adding on for the extra support that you need. What the public system thinks is that if you need more than 4 hours a day, you should be in a care facility. So that's at what point they would say, we're not going to pay for more than that because it's less expensive for us to have you in a supportive living facility. So that's kind of why they cap it at 4 hours. Now, just to add some complexity to the question, with COVID, public home care has had massive staffing shortages because if anyone's had any kind of exposure, they have to go off work for long periods of time. So during COVID, public home care has cut back almost by 75% what they're providing. If someone's getting 4 hours a day before, they might be getting 1 hour a day now. If people were getting 1 hour a day before, they might have been cut off altogether on public home care. So these days, public home care is very limited as to what they can provide because it's just, they're having such challenges with capacity. And so people are moving into the private home care option a lot earlier. I guess the other thing to know about home care is there is a system called self-managed care where you can have your public home care dollars. So what they've determined you're qualified for, you can direct those to a private care company. And there's a lot of hoops to jump through to do that. But technically, the public system will say, well, we think you need 2 hours a day. We'll give you that money instead, and you can use it to pay for a private caregiver. So there's lots of options. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
I'd like to just jump in with the self-managed care idea. It's if somebody has been approved, as Kathy says, for public home care, if you've been receiving it for a period of time, it used to be 3 months. I think maybe they have shortened it. Then you have the option, you can apply for self-managed care, meaning you would then have the responsibility of managing that pot of money. It has to be totally separate, it has to be a separate bank account. You have to account for it to the penny. They will tell you about the program, but then also sometimes scare the death out of people or scare the heck out of them because of all of their requirements. You can do it two ways. So say I have, so this client right now, she's approved for 4 hours a day. Now, public home care, again, is just Monday to Friday. Families to pick up the slack on the weekends. So she's approved for 20 hours a week. If they move that over to self-managed care, and again, I don't know how much per hour, I'm thinking it's just the straight salary that they would be paying that home care worker, which is probably $18 an hour. I'm gonna have to ask them.
They're currently 19. They're paying $19 an hour for self-managed care. So
20 times 19, 2 times 19 is 38, 380 a week. So just under 1,500, say, a month. So if this family was approved for self-managed care, they would have access to $1,500 a month to use for care services. Now, it can't be nursing care. It has to be non-nursing. And they have two routes. They can become an employer and directly hire a caregiver. Now, if that's the case, then you have to do it as a legitimate employer. You have to have a payroll number and you have to do your CRA remittances such as EI and CPP and income tax, etc. Or you can just take that pot of money and use it to purchase hours from a private company. Now, we've just said that if it's $19 an hour that the government is paying the workers, and you go to the private home care and it's twice that, maybe it's, could be up to $38 an hour. So now you could get 20 hours a week from the government, but if you turn on a buy it now, maybe you can only buy 10 hours a week. So, there can be trade-offs.
Mhm.
The
There's
advantage-
trade-offs and there's lots of hoops.
Yes.
They don't make it easy to do that. It's possible, but it's
So I'm going to put in a pitch here with my my company, Financial Concierge. That's one of the services that we're being asked to do more and more often, is to manage those self-managed care dollars. So sort of help them go through the hoops. If they want to be an employer, we set it up through QuickBooks, we set up payroll, we get the payroll number, etc. The most economical way to do it is likely to be the employer, because now I can maybe hire that caregiver. Maybe I can hire somebody I really, really like. Maybe I'm paying them $22 an hour, but I know that I'm going to have the same person every time. I can tell them exactly when we want them to be there and how many hours at a stretch. So anyway, there's lots of flex around that, but you just need to know that there is some help out there if people are feeling overwhelmed by the paperwork organization side of it. We can give people
The one thing to note when you become the employer is that you are paying upfront for that employee and getting reimbursed by the government.
I think you actually get paid by the government up front.
Do you?
They pay you a pot and then you dip into it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of irrelevant, really. They'll pay you and you use that money to pay. So if you decide not to use that money, you will have to pay it back.
Yeah.
So they give you the money up front, but then you have to account for it. Yeah. Yeah. So.
And the audit's pretty detailed, but that's fine. I mean, I don't want the money to be going to bingo cards either. If I'm a taxpayer, I want to make sure that that money is going to providing to care costs. When you are an employer, like say if I paid somebody $20 an hour, it's actually going to be costing me a little more than that as an employer, because I have to pay the employer piece of the remittances. So when you were working and you're an employee, remember you paid CPP and you paid EI? Well, guess what? Your employer did too. And they pay the same CPP as you do, but they pay a little bit more for the EI part of it. So those are all, so you need to do all the sort of cost calculations. I don't want to confuse the heck out of you, but it can be convoluted, but it can be done. So
it tends to be worthwhile if you know that you're going to have caregivers for a really long period of time. So it's worth the effort to do all that setup. And also if you really feel that you want someone that you know that you've chosen, because in the public system with public home care, you don't have any choice as to who your caregiver is. It may be a different person on a regular basis. And so if that is something that doesn't sit well and you're going to have care for a long time, it might be worthwhile to pursue self-managed care. If it's a short-term situation, it doesn't necessarily make sense, in my opinion.
Any other questions? You'll have to unmute yourself to ask a question. Bev, glad to see you. Did you have a question for us? You have to unmute yourself. Still can't hear you. I'm not sure why I can't unmute from my end. That would be nice, wouldn't it? I should help. There you are.
Okay.
There.
I was wondering what Kathy's fee would be.
So for housing support, when we're helping someone figure out where they need to move to, it's a flat rate fee of $550. And we work with people as long as it takes. There's no time limit. Sometimes we're planning well out into the future, and sometimes we're working on a really short time frame.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Some other questions? Ken, how about you? You were very quiet. Trying to ask to unmute. What they unmute if you go to the bottom of your, there you go. There's that little microphone.
I got it. This is my first time joining this group, and I've found it extremely interesting. We don't live in Calgary. We're 35 miles southeast. of Calgary. So in future time, I would be interested in finding out how things would work out in the county of Wheatland and, that kind of thing. But I found this very informative. Next time my wife will join me, and now that I've tested the water, so to speak.
How did you hear about the webinar, Ken?
Our financial advisor just sent me kind of an email about it a couple of days ago, and I thought that's something that I could benefit from.
Was his name Steve?
No, this is Colleen Derrick.
Oh, hi,
From
Colleen.
Strathmore.
Okay, yeah. He's on the call today too. Super. Okay. Well, that's great. We as I say, we do these calls once a month, and typically what we're doing is we're showcasing businesses and business owners and services that people might not have heard about. So the two they're on for next month, I have Colette from Access Dental Hygiene. She's a mobile dental hygienist, and also Brad Lohman from Vitality, and he offers he has a home care company. In the past, we had Maintenance Works. So Kathy, when you talked about that tipping point, Wayne with Maintenance Works, he can come in and say, do an assessment of your home and say, well, your roof's probably good for another 3 years. It's probably going to cost you $85,000 to replace. And that leaking window, that's not a good sign. You better replace that because it's probably already into the drywall. So he can provide a little bit of input as to what kind of maintenance, what kinds of things you're looking at in your house. Is that
An expensive roof.
I'm guessing. Oh, they've had cedar shakes.
$85,000.
Well, my brother
you
has
better-
one.
You better just move if you need an $85,000 roof. Talk to Bill.
Kathy,
That's why
Kathy,
that's not
you're
my
in the
business.
wrong business.
Yeah. So so that's what we're doing with these calls. So if you've enjoyed the call, I'll certainly keep you on my list for another time. And also any other suggestions, like if you hear of an interesting business or a service, please just drop me an email and let me know. I'm always happy to reach out to people. There seemed to be some interest from but that online wills. So I think I'll ask Aaron if he would do one of the webinars with us, and he can even show us what the software is like. And again, it's for basic wills. So there's from what I've seen so far, there's sort of a couple of 4 or 5 questions at the beginning. And if you say yes to any of those questions, then it kicks you out because you really should be dealing with a lawyer to get your will done. I always say I'll work with people in terms of estate administration. But if David tells me he has 3 ex-wives, 10 kids, 2 are drug addicts, one is permanently disabled, and he owns a bunch of land in Florida, I'm going to say, David, I'm not your gal. This is complex. This might be a good one for the trust companies. So we all kind of know what our limits are. So anyway, any other questions or comments from anybody?
How did you know my past history? I've never met you before.
Oh, I could just tell you're a man of secret with your visor on.
Eyes are hurting and I'm getting notifications that are just making me sick. So
Oh.
He's on the senior SWAT team.
Oh dear.
not everybody knows my past. What's going on here?
And I never knew I was a psychic.
Been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your information. I hope you'll put me on your list.
Yeah, well, and what I do after is I'll post the recordings on the video recording on the Aging in Place website. So if you have friends that didn't participate, like those couple of gals that couldn't log in today, you can always go and find the webinars. They'll be up in a couple of days. So thank you very much, everybody, for logging in today. It's been lots of fun.
Thank you,
And,
Jill, for putting this on.
And hopefully
Thank you.
we'll see some of you next month. So that would be November.
Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Okay.
Thank you.